Hey all, it's KR King of D&D Homebrew here today to talk about using a mysterious event, place, or phenomenon in your world to add flavor to that world, to motivate your players to explore your world, but also kind of as a procedural example of how you can create something that potentially has a long-term storyline, series of encounters, rewards for the players that initially you don't have to sketch out in incredible detail because, by definition, this mysterious place or phenomenon or whatever is unexplained. You just give the players a basic idea of what's going on, and then you leave it to them. And then as they explore it and decide, you can flesh this out. Again, if you want to totally have it explained before you ever introduce it to the players, you can. But here's the thing. I did an earlier video that I'll put a link up here about a mysterious NPC. And you check that out where this is unexpectedly the players released this figure that was petrified in a Medusa's lair. I had no idea who, I didn't expect them to do this. And so I kept him mysterious for a while, and then I realized there was power in that mystery. I had a few abilities that I gave him, but he was a total enigma, and players talk about it to this day. So mysteries have this power. When they're solved, they kind of lose their luster, right? And the thing is, oftentimes players are motivated by the aspect of treasure, magic items, whatever. But the thing about a mystery is there's a motivation to solve what happened. When someone disappears or when some event occurs, it's not explained. There's a desire to figure it out. Because the thing is, D&D is a game. And we are most connected to games when we're kids, right? So when I was a kid, which was a long time ago, mysterious events and places, creatures just fascinated me. The Devil's Triangle, Bigfoot, the Yeti, places in America. You have these tourist traps, the mystery spot where, water runs uphill. And this was totally fascinating to me. Well, the thing is, you become an adult and you realize these places are all fake. There is no Bigfoot. Maybe some of you out there do believe still, but there isn't any. But in the world of D&D, all these things are real, right? There are fantastical and mysterious places. There are events that go against the laws of physics because they don't apply in the world of D&D. Because this is a storytelling game based on a fantasy environment. And as you know from reading fantasy novels, anything can happen. The Yeti is in the Monster Manual. And another thing that mysteries do in terms of enhancing the flavor of your world is to reflect the setting. Now, I always use the classic high medieval European setting for my D&D campaigns. You can use whatever kind of setting you want. The thing is, this was a period where there wasn't a lot of scientific knowledge in the world. A lot of people were, totally uneducated, totally used supernatural explanations for almost everything. So they believed in, strange sea monsters or giants or lands where things operated differently. So this, when you have mysterious spots, mysterious events, it sort of plays into the ethos of the setting that you have. But again, if you have your D&D in a modern setting, believe me, people believe in this kind of thing all the time. We saw these UFO encounters with American jet aircraft. Everybody always goes right to the aliens, right? But whereas I've seen there's some explanations of these things in terms of computer glitches or the way the radar operates, all this other stuff that is much more plausible, but it's not as interesting, right? It's not as fun as to imagine UFOs. Well, it's the same thing in the world of D&D, and that's what you're doing. So the mystery itself, if it's explained, if it's just radar phenomenon and not aliens, it kind of sucks, right? Same thing in the world of D&D. So I'm going to give some examples from two classic tropes of mysteries: the mysterious event and the mysterious place. So a mysterious event obviously is a one-time thing that happens. So I'm going to use just a historical example, classical disappearance. Amelia Earhart, she was a very famous aviator in the 20s and 30s. She was embarked on an around-the-world flight in 1937, and she and her navigator disappeared in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and no wreckage was ever found. So no evidence of what happened. So, of course, this spawned all sorts of fantastical explanations. She was crash landed and is living on an island somewhere in the Pacific, or she was captured by the Japanese, or she was a spy for the American government. All sorts of, bizarre and fantastical. She was sucked into a vortex into another dimension. I mean, you can, wherever you want to go. Whereas in reality, she crashed her plane in a vast ocean and it just sank and she died. but she was famous, and that renown made the search for her front page news. And the enduring mystery of what happened to her. Books have been written, films have been made, right, because of this fame. So if you, in a world of D&D, someone disappears, let's say it's an explorer, an adventurer, especially if they have renown, especially if they're a powerful figure and they're looking for something. She was making an around the world trip, again, for the publicity, but someone is searching for something and they disappear. It's going to get people's interest. What happened to them? What were they searching for? Did they find it? This kind of thing. Now, of course, there's a temporal aspect to this disappearance. If it's only been a week since they left, no one's saying, oh, they disappeared. A month, maybe, then a year. Now suddenly they've disappeared, right? Now suddenly people are like, what happened to them? And it doesn't have to be one person. You had the famous Roanoke Island colony in the 1580s or 90s that the supply ship came in. I think it was in 1590, and no one was there. They had abandoned their camp. They had the word Croatan carved into a tree. There was a Croatan island, so they were going to go back. They said, oh, they just went to Croatan Island, but then there was a big storm. They couldn't go to see them. By the time they got back to Croatan Island, they weren't there, and the Native Americans that lived there said, we never saw them, right? So what is the explanation? Were they killed by the Native Americans or just starved to death or wandered into the woods? Nobody knows. It's an enduring mystery. Check out my video on ghost ships where I covered ships that are found in the ocean where they just seem to have been abandoned, right? The stove is still burning. There's food on the table. These are all alliterations. It's not really the case, but we're going to do that in the world of D&D, right? This kind of mystery is very fascinating. And again, if you create a ghost ship or you create a village that's been abandoned, that is just what happens. And then the players start to investigate. And maybe you have a general idea. Maybe you have no idea. And you let them, a one-word clue that leads to something else. Because in the world of D&D, disappearances can happen, in the world of magic. Think of, Bilbo disappearing at his birthday party in Lord of the Rings. We had a magic ring, right? The invisibility ring. Wasn't any big deal. If you have a wizard in a locked room and he's got access to his spell book, throws a teleporter or a D-door and he gets out. Or a misty step, whatever it is, right? There's all sorts of magical abilities. But let's say a powerful wizard disappears from their tower and is just never heard of, and they just abandon everything, like the ghost ship, right? All their stuff is there. Where did they go? What happened to them? This becomes a mystery. Now, in the world I'm running, my campaign, I have the Keep of Niz. Niz was this famous wizard like 200 years ago. This huge explosion destroyed his tower. He's presumed dead, although no evidence of his body or anything was ever found. Plus, would he be killed? He was so powerful. And this keep, his dungeon underneath is still there, but it's protected by all sorts of spells and curses. And, also, people don't go there. It's considered deadly. My players who are at 6th level at this point are still worried about going there. They think, oh, it's really deadly. But this mystery is out there, and it's been 200 years since he disappeared. So none of the, people that knew him or anything are still alive. Now it's an enduring mystery of what's at the tower, right? He is most likely dead wherever he went, probably blown up. But the tower stuff, what's still there? What treasures are still there? And if you take the disappearing colony example and apply it to D&D, it doesn't just have to be everyone has abandoned the village. What if the village has disappeared? What if there isn't any evidence that it was ever there? It's been transported, right? And what does that mean? Did they build it at some nexus point between planes or something where something occurred and, they disappeared? And what motivates the players? Let's say you have the village. Let's say they just all disappear from the village, but the buildings are all intact. Well, what motivates the players? Well, maybe there's somebody connected to the players in their background that they know, a family member or something. Or maybe they were sent there to get some information, and suddenly they're all gone. But more often they just hear about this. People come back and say, these villages just abandoned the village. Something happened. And a lot of players will just say, well, that's an adventure hook, right? And the GM is saying we should go check that out. So they go and they look and they do the clues, and there's like one word carved in a tree, and they got to figure out what that is. And maybe you don't know at this point, right, as the GM. Again, you can always just have this all worked out. But what I'm saying is, with a mystery like this, let things percolate. Let there be dead ends. Let the players fail. They can't figure it out. And then eventually, when you think of some connection, and then you can lay it in somewhere else where they're like, wait a minute, we've seen that word before. That was carved into the tree at the missing village. What's this? And you've created some kind of connection. And the missing village thing, often this should be fairly recent. If people abandoned a village 200 or 300 years ago, there's no compelling, nobody knows them, right? And it's not like a Keep of Niz situation where there's a treasure trove underneath, right? But so maybe it's an enduring, maybe this becomes related to a mysterious place. And this can be in an event. So you have, when you have a blood moon on the seventh day, the seventh month of the seventh year of a century, right? Something occurs in a place. This is like the old Brigadoon musical, right? Where the town appears once every 100 years on the Scottish Highlands. So there's something like this where something occurs and the players need to figure out they need to get something through this dimension or whatever, or rescue these people. Maybe they're in a time dimension like Brigadoon where they stay the same, right? Of course, in that, if anyone ever leaves, then it disappears forever, which is the hook of the play. But you could certainly have this in D&D. You connect an event or a specific date with a place such that some magical event is going to occur. And there's all sorts of other mysterious events that you can draw from the real world. Something like spontaneous combustion, where someone suddenly just turns into flame in some innocuous situation. You have the mysterious killer, like Jack the Ripper, or the Zodiac Killer, something like that. And if you have something like this that's happened long ago, and suddenly it starts happening again, because in D&D, killers or, spells or something can work through time, or they can have some delay or whatever. Oh my God, this is the same. There's a Night Stalker episode, The Night Strangler. Check it out. It's a movie where this killer arises every 21 years. He lives forever, but he has to get the blood from like 7 different young women to sustain himself. And so you have something like this, where every 21 years, or 30 years or 100 years, however you want to do it, these events occur. And the players happen to be temporarily in that period where this mysterious event is either going to occur or has just occurred. Because if you have a blood moon event and some village is going to appear, disappear, or something's going to happen, and the players find this out, they're going to go there to that spot, and they're going to wait for this to happen. And again, if you've just set up, okay, I'm going to do this thing, this phenomenon occurs at this specific spot on this specific day, but I'm not prepared for it. Well, you got time to, when they make their way there, or however much time has occurred when they find this out beforehand. Now, the thing about the keep of Niz, you have this mysterious disappearance of Niz, but then his keep becomes a mysterious place. And this is, such a long history of Atlantis, as I mentioned, the Devil's Triangle, the mystery spot where basically it's a tourist trap where they build a building with these optical illusions, so it appears that people at one end of a room are really small and the other end are big and all that kind of stuff. But in D&D, of course, these can be nexus points between planes, some area where magic operates differently for unknown reasons, and maybe the players just stumble into this area, maybe they hear about it. Atlantis was an island that sank beneath the waves, perhaps in an earthquake, perhaps because they did something, angered the gods, whatever. Well, certainly you have Atlantis examples, underwater cities like this all the time in D&D. And they might be difficult to find, because it is under the water, so the players get some information. They have to go, a ship somewhere, then they have to have, underwater breathing and freedom of movement spell, all that kind of stuff if you want to run an underwater adventure. And, this mysterious place, which you've just established as a legend, it sank, 500 years ago or whatever, like Atlantis in the distant past, and suddenly they have access to it. The other thing about having a mysterious place where sinister things happen or mysterious things is actually it's a ruse, the sort of Scooby-Doo effect, right? Where criminals are up to something in some town, and so they create this monster or ghost or whatever to scare people away so that they can do this. And there's a module, I think, in the Ghosts of Saltmarsh, the Haunted Mansion, and this is basically the setup. There's smugglers there, and they're hiding their smuggling activities, scaring people away with a ghost situation. So again, you have a mysterious event that has occurred, some phenomenon that appeared in a specific geographical location. Some person that has mysteriously disappeared, a troop of soldiers that suddenly was gone, the missing brigade kind of thing. This has gone through history. And then they give the players a motivation, either, perhaps just for the pure mystery, but perhaps, the missing brigade had famously, a huge amount of gold they were transporting, magic items, this kind of thing. There's some tangible reward, or just the mystery itself, or you can connect it to a storyline that you're doing where this person that they needed help from suddenly mysteriously disappeared. It's connected probably to the villains that are associated with this storyline, but maybe not. And the main thing is you don't necessarily have to have it all worked out, essentially, because you are using the idea that it is mysterious. Let it unfold organically. It's one of these lessons of running D&D that you realize, a homebrewed, sandboxed world, that you're going to start small and work your way out. And part of that process is to set things up for the future or for whatever, but see where the players go. If they don't bite, you don't have to necessarily know every single aspect of it and every hit point and stat block, right? You just have established it. But then when the players begin to investigate, you think about what this could be. And remember, you can connect mysterious places and events with things the players have already discovered. Because as you're creating your homebrewed world, as you're elaborating on storylines and personages that the players meet in their travels, they're the ones kind of generating this. Think about ways with a mysterious event or place that can connect to something that they've already encountered, and experienced in the world, because that gives it a sense of connection. That gives it a sense that it's a real world. How many times you look on, Facebook or LinkedIn and you're like, oh my God, that person knows another friend of mine, right? There's a connection there in the real world. There's a connection to, I went to some city and ran into somebody that knew someone else or whatever, or they worked in the same industry that I did, something like that, right? There are these connections in the real world. So you can create them by setting up a basic template. There is this person that disappeared. There is this village that's every 10 years, all magic is, quintuple in strength or something like that. Well, why? Why is this occurring? Well, the players ran into X at some point, so I'm going to connect it with that. I'm going to say when they finally get there, I'm going to flesh this out. But I waited until the campaign unfolded. I waited till events transpired such that I can make those connections based on what the players are doing. And when you do this and when you realize how powerful this is, and also how it makes your job easier as a GM, I think you're going to find that these mystery spots, these mystery events are a really powerful tool. So if you like what you've seen, please subscribe to my channel. I'm always looking for more. Leave some comments. Love to hear about mysteries that you've created in your own world. And most importantly, keep playing an RPG game of your choice. Tell somebody else about it.